Hey, Alli, have you had any tough conversations that just make your blood boil? And what do you do for those conversations to get through them?
Absolutely. And it's especially tough when it's not your own family or close friends. And our guest today is the perfect person to talk about being in a big family. He's not just in any big family, but the big family.
Are you talking about the Kennedys, the same Kennedys that include JFK and Bobby and the mom Eunice that started the Special Olympics?
Yes. So we are interviewing Tim Shriver, and Eunice Kennedy Shriver was his mom, and she started the Special Olympics. JFK, his uncle, Bobby Kennedy, his uncle, Ted Kennedy, and he is going to help us have learn how to do these difficult conversations and do it in a way that we don't negatively impact our health or our relationships.
Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, where we dive deep into pressing health and fitness issues facing aging women. I'm Alli Kerr.
And I'm Shawna Kaminski, and together we'll bring candid conversations, expert advice, and personal stories that will inspire and empower you on your own wellness journey.
We are here with Tim Shriver, and so excited to talk about how we talk about things and what we can do ourselves as individuals to help avoid conflict or help diffuse conflict and find out about his wealth of knowledge and experience in this area. So welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, Tim.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be with you.
So we want to just dive in and get into just kind of, and you can give us a little backstory. I know you've worked with the Special Olympics for 25 plus years and how that has kind of been a part of your story, but then now you've taken this on this new challenge, I'm going to call it. So tell us a little bit about where you're at now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Alli, and thanks for all the work you do to promote healthy aging, to promote health in particular, to give people a safe place where they can come to learn from experts and other ne'er-do-wells like me, ideas and creative solutions to some of life's most challenging problems. How do we keep our health? How do we age gracefully? How do we age in a way that keeps us grounded in heart and mind and body? And right now, I've become very interested in the heart part of that. I spent the early part of my career in schools developing a field called social and emotional learning. And a lot of that work was just around how do you help children self regulate? How do you help children be sure that they are safe within themselves and be able to ask adults for help? How do you help children learn to listen more deeply? Are there skills we can teach children? And that field has grown dramatically because it works, because when children learn how to take a deep breath in a conflict, when they learn how to use positive self-talk when they're feeling fear, when they learn how to seek help. How do you know when you need to ask someone else for help? When you practice those skills, it not only helps you feel safer in school, but it helps you learn better. So you're more likely to learn math if you feel safe and cared for by the people in your classroom than if you feel unsafe. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's kind of common sense. So, all that, though, was kind of focused on how do we make sure that emotionally or socially, I would almost say spiritually, we're healthy, we're strong, we're nurturing the qualities, the skills, the relationships that we need to stay strong internally so that when we reach out into the world, whether it's at our jobs or with our families or in the gym, we're reaching out with the best of us. We're not reaching out in a space of anger or hostility. I mean, there's no movement in the world that teaches that more powerfully than Special Olympics. I mean, here you have people all over the world who have intellectual challenges, and they're treated badly, and they're often rejected. And most people who don't have an intellectual disability, we don't realize it, but we're actually kind of afraid. So there's kind of a wounded spirit here. It's like, ooh, I don't know about that, or ooh, that's uncomfortable, or she doesn't look like me, or he doesn't, I don't know how he's going to act. There's a lot of anxiety. What does Special Olympics do in that experience? Just brings people together to play. And all of a sudden, someone who you're afraid of, who you might not be able to feel comfortable speaking to, don't know what their personal qualities are, they're just running 100 meters, and
Yeah.
they're just putting their arms up in the air, and they're just a 12-year-old like any other 12-year-old. And somehow it just melts, it puts us in touch with a part of us that's not afraid of each other.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I didn't plan to say all that, but here's the country today. Here's a lot of not just women, but a lot of women and men. We're afraid of each other.
Yeah.
We've been told, hey, be careful out there. I was just talking to my son the other, oh, Dad, it's going to be a terrible year.
Hmm.
The world is a mess. Think of what the Republicans are going to do. Think of what the Democrats are going to do. It's going to be ugly out there.
Hmm.
So we're being told all the time that, everybody who's not in your little group is dangerous to you.
Hmm.
Right.
I
Yeah.
hate to tell you, it's not true. Yeah, it's not true. And the fear breeds contempt. Contempt leads to hatred. And you know what? Those are self-perpetuating cycles. They're almost addictive.
Hmm.
So we have a whole business in our country. I call it, I learned this from Arthur Brooks, the outrage industrial complex. Its goal is to sell us devotional anger and to pry us apart. Why? Because it's a good business.
Hmm.
Oh,
I'm sorry to
yeah.
say, it's a good business. You're
Yeah.
doing the opposite. You're trying to do a health industrial complex to bring people in touch with the best in themselves and the best in others. And you've got a business out there that's fighting you every day.
Yeah.
And that business is saying, don't work out, don't go to the gym, don't take care of yourself. It's scary out there. If you do take care of yourself, stay in the house. You're alone. The world is against you. And I
Yeah.
think this podcast is about reminding people that when you're in touch with the best of yourself, just like those little kids in third grade we used to teach social and emotional skills to, when you're in touch with the best in yourself and you listen for it in others, you're not going to agree on everything, but
Yeah.
you're not going to hate people and
Yeah.
you're not going to be afraid of them. And the same way people go to sometimes that first Special Olympics event and they're anxious, they think they're going to be depressed. They think it's going to be a sad event and they walk out with tears in their eyes, tears of joy, and they think, wow, what I didn't know. That's kind of what our country needs today. A little pulling back the veil. What we don't know about each other is keeping us from trusting and believing in each other. And that's what we're about trying to do with the Dignity Index and Unite.us. That was a long answer. Sorry.
That's a great answer.
Interesting. Yeah. Just before we kind of dig into some of those other, I want to know more about Unite Us and the Dignity Index. For those people that don't know your introduction to the Special Olympics, could you just share kind of how that started?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I'm on your podcast. And my only credential is that I was raised by a fiercely passionate, determined woman who was tough as nails and worked into her late 80s. Even when her body was breaking down, she was still committed, still passionate, still determined. So I know what it's like. My mom was helping children come out of institutions in the early 60s when nobody was paying attention. And she started thinking, well, maybe I can get some of these kids out of these places and at least teach them how to swim or go on a pony ride. We lived on a farm in suburban Maryland at the time. And so she created a summer camp and she called it Camp Shriver. And starting when I was, I guess, 4 years old, every summer for about 3 or 4 weeks, our backyard turned into a summer camp for children with intellectual disabilities and for non-disabled peers, volunteers from local schools, mostly girls, by the way, were the volunteer counselors, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old high school students. Mostly they gave their summer to swim and do pony rides and play kickball and climb obstacle courses and stuff like that with children who were forgotten by the world. That summer camp turned into Special Olympics in 1968. So I grew up with a woman who was fiercely determined to lead what we now call an inclusion revolution, because it is a revolution. If you said, let's just say we were all three of us Republicans, and let's just say we were all very devoted to conservative causes. If I were to say to the two of you, hey, you know what? I think we should spend more time around Democrats. I'd be taking a chance.
Yeah.
Because you might say, "Whoa, he's gone off the deep end now. I mean, he's gone to the dark side." And the same thing would be true if we were Democrats talking about Republicans. My mom, I kind of think of her as having said in 1950, 55, and 60, you may think of a child with an intellectual disability as a pariah, as the wrong kind of person, as a person we want to remove, but I'm going over and I'm going to learn more about them.
Yeah.
And that took guts.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, that wasn't just compassion and that wasn't just charity, that was courage.
All
And the
right.
movement she led to creating the Special Olympics movement is really just all about people being courageous and in taking a chance on each other. And, you know, I've seen it all over the world. I mean, we have 1,000,000 athletes in Special Olympics in China, believe it or not, you
Amazing.
know. So everybody's, you know, saying how horrible China is. Well, China may be tough on trade, on economics, militarily, but moms and dads in China who have a child with Down syndrome are just like moms and dads in North Carolina or Texas or Montana or California who have a child with Down syndrome. They want the same thing for their kids. They want their kids to be accepted. And I just feel like that message needs to get out, you know, not just to be a message about program, Special Olympics, needs to be a message about all of us. We need to take a chance. We need to listen deeply to it. We're not going to agree on everything. Look, if someone wants to build a wall and somebody else wants open borders, they're not going to agree. My goal is not to tell people, oh, just moderate your position. We don't. We say, you know, don't drop any of your most passionately held principles. Just add one. Treat the other person with dignity. That's it. Work as hard as you want for what you believe in, but don't demonize and hate and treat with contempt your fellow Americans.
One
It's
of the things
nothing. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, just one of the things that when you were talking about how it's like a business of the negativity and the
Yeah,
division. We actually know this from the fitness industry because that's how fitness is sold. You know, it's sold as there's always the bad guy, which is the belly fat or whatever it is, and then there's always
mhm,
the knight in shining armor, the product that is being sold that's going to come in and save you from the evil belly fat or whatever it is. And so
right.
we know that is that, and that's how algorithms are
Yeah,
done online, whether it's about some kind of social something or something that is fitness related. And one of the things that I hear you saying is that when you're speaking about the Olympics and the mother with the child, the father with the child that has Down syndrome, is that we have more in common than we think. And so, can you speak to that and how we can?
well, you know, a lot of people challenge me when I say that, Ellie, and they say, "Wait a minute, I don't wanna be have anything in common with those people. I don't wanna be united with people that think like that. That's why I don't speak to my Uncle George, because I don't agree with him. I wanna be separate from him." Um, so when we say we have more in common, I think we have to remember we have something very specific in common. At the deepest level, we all want the same things. At the superficial level, we might want very different things. You might like Chinese food, I might like Italian food. We don't have to agree on that.
That we both
You
want to
go
fill
to a
our.
but we both wanna fill our bellies and our hearts and our souls, right? So if we wanna listen for what we have in common, we gotta listen a little more deeply.
Mm. And how do
I
we
say,
do?
"Allie, you love the Chinese," whatever, I can't remember what I said. Uh, "But what is it about it?" "Well, you know, I grew up and my mom always made Italian food, and I've always loved the smell because I can remember, or my grandma came over and she always would bring a or my grandpa always told stories about when he went to China when he was a little boy," or whatever. Now I'm starting to hear that, yeah, the fact that you like a different food than I do is fine, but I'm starting to hear a real part of you.
Mm.
And that part of you I can not only respect, I can identify with, I could even love that part of you in, you know, in a kind of healthy way. And I can love that part of myself that, wow, isn't that beautiful? That story about her mom in China or her dad cooking or whatever it was. Uh, and it can strengthen my soul. I mean, the enemy, you know this better than I do, but I don't think the enemy is body image here. I think the enemy is self image.
Mhm. Sure.
And you know, if my if I'm strong enough inside me, you know what my body looks like. I mean, we're all going to end up looking different. Let's just be honest. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't get in shape. Doesn't mean you can't fall out of shape. You can do both. But if you're strong inside, if your spirit is good, if your confidence is good, if you're surrounded by people who love and care about you, you put on 10 pounds, you lose 10. I mean, you put on 50 pounds, you might lose 10. But when you lose those 10, or even when you put on the 50, you might think, well, I'm still fine. So you want to be healthy. We all want each other to be healthy, but I do think sometimes the image we have about our bodies becomes a source of stress and pain coming from the outside in. People pointing, you thinking I'm
Mhm.
being judged because my body looks like A or B or C, and it's that judgment. The Special Olympics athletes taught me this a long time ago. You know that saying where dance like no one's watching.
Mm.
I like to change it. Here's what Special Olympics athletes told me: dance like everyone's watching and no one's judging.
Mm.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Really, what we're afraid of is judgment
Mhm. And loneliness, how does that play into all of this? All of the
and
all
loneliness. Well, because judgment, creates a sense of fear, creates shame. When you feel ashamed, you don't want to go out. You don't trust yourself. You don't have confidence. And we have a loneliness epidemic in this country. We have a crisis of connection in this country. But some of that is just the amount of times we're being told that people are after you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when you see those ads of the perfect body, that means you're less than perfect. You should be ashamed of yourself. When you see the story about those horrible people in the other party, well, you better be afraid of them. And when you hear the person at work say, nobody here respects me, then, oh my God, I'm not comfortable at work. And before you know it, you're ordering food and you're
Yeah.
cooking on your stove top and you're watching television deep into the night and waking up in the morning thinking, my life has turned lonely. It's a hard cycle to break, but because we're in a cycle where the contempt and the fear are feeding on each other, and the more of it gets fed to us, in a way, it's like a toxin. It's like a virus.
Mm. Why do
You
we
know,
why do we need people, and those people that even that in our family or friends, what that maybe we don't have the same, maybe we don't like the same kind of food that they like.
yeah.
Why do we need each other?
Well, look, I think in the end of the day, we all live for love. We all live for connection. We all live to belong. We all live to believe we're something part of something bigger.
Mm.
So we're all, hope that our lives matter, and they matter if you're religious to God. If you're not, they matter to your country, perhaps. Maybe they just matter to your family. Maybe your life just matters to you. But if your life matters to you, you'll share your life with others. I think we're made restlessly eager and hungry to matter to others, and I don't think there's a lot of evidence on this from social science that we're not help we don't grow even in infancy. There's a
Mhm.
syndrome called failure to thrive. It's the absence of connection that actually limits the capacity of the infant to grow physically.
Yeah.
So we are made for each other. It doesn't mean everybody has to have 100 friends. It doesn't mean everybody has to, be going out every Friday night to some social activity but I think we need to know and feel that we belong in a larger web of life. That's I think is fundamental to being human as anything. And and when we don't feel that, I don't think we do well physically. I don't think our hearts, we get heart disease, we get stress. We're more likely to have cardiovascular and diabetic, these kinds of diabetes, these kinds of diseases. We're less likely to have a healthy brain.
Yeah.
Our bodies just start telling us, look, this isn't where we belong. We belong to others. Um, so everybody has a different tolerance or different needs socially, but I think we all have a fundamental hunger to matter. And again, I've learned this from the athletes of Special Olympics, sometimes spending 5, 10, 15, 20 years alone. They get
Yeah.
their chance and they score their goal.
Yeah.
and that, I remember one athlete, Miguel from Philadelphia, telling me I went to my first event and I ran a race and I heard all this noise and all this cheering and all this. I looked around, I said, "What happened? What's going on here?" And I looked up and he said, "And they were cheering for me.
Oh,
They were cheering for me." He says, I never knew that. It changed his life. One
amazing.
little race.
Yeah.
Somebody cares.
We all want somebody cheering for it's nice. Nice. That's
Going,
I'd say it's almost life.
yes.
Nice, but it's almost life-giving.
Yeah.
yeah.
And you can't make a country where people, we're not gonna make it if we hate each other.
Mm.
The
So
premise of
going,
the dignity index is we can do better. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no. I was going to say, going back to, the doom and gloom of how big business is, the wheels of big business go on the negativity. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And I can't expect that to change. So I have to start with me. So, what would be some of your strategies? And maybe this is where the dignity index comes
Yeah,
into play in terms of like, how can I have that difficult conversation with someone that I don't agree with and still appreciate them as a person and not want to like never see them in my life? Because this is
right.
how family members and this happens all the time. So
Yeah.
a practical
What we've done is you can look at listeners can look at this at dignityindex.us. We've built a scale, and the scale shows on the one end what it's like to talk about someone with utter hatred. That person should be destroyed, killed. And on the other end of the extreme, how to talk to someone you disagree with complete dignity, how to love the person, even the person who has done something horrible or terrible to you, and all the steps in between. So, Shawna, what the premise here is that we don't feel better when we cut off conversation, and we don't feel better when we demonize people we disagree with. We actually make it more likely that we'll be divided from others. We make it less likely that we solve problems,
Mm.
and we actually make it more likely that violence will ensue. Maybe not within our families, but not too distant from our families when we break off and yield to the hate and the contempt. So the index kind of says to you, okay, I disagree. Let's just take an easy one. I disagree with you on the border. I think there should be a border wall, and you think there should be open borders. Now, I could say you're a evil, horrible person. I could say you're malicious and lacking compassion. I could say you've become a child of evil in the way in which you advocate and you're going to destroy this country if we don't destroy you. That's a 2 on the scale.
yeah.
Now, if you look at it, though, you can look at a 4 or a 6, and you can find a way to say the shift is actually focus on facts, policies, and outcomes. So let's say I'm the person who wants to build the wall. I would just focus on, look, we have a crisis. Here are the numbers. Here are the cost of the numbers. Here's the effect of these numbers on the countries from which these people are coming. If we don't stop the flow, here's what might happen. Now, I could argue, I'm using that as an example. I don't have to hate you to argue that.
Yeah.
I can actually say, look, I know why you, again, I'm just using this example, why you believe in open borders. You're a compassionate woman. You're a charitable woman. You care for people who are vulnerable. You have a big open heart. But, Shawna, a big open heart is not going to solve this problem. So I'm not attacking you. And I could even say, someday, Shawna, I'd like to have the same open heart you have. I aspire to it, but I still want to build a wall right now. You see? Now, all of a sudden, why is this practical? It's not just practical because it might make us get along at Thanksgiving dinner or, at a baptism or a wedding or something. It's practical because actually that conversation has a chance to help us heal and find a way forward. Because
Yeah.
if you find yourself being supported in the fact that your compassion is what's driving you, you're less likely to attack me personally, not the wall or the absence of the wall, but me. And if
Yeah.
it's just Shawna's a jerk and Tim's a jerk, guess what we have? No solution. What do we have after 25 years of political debate on the border? No significant public policy. Why? Because both sides do better by attacking each other than by solving the problem.
Yeah.
And it's
So the
not.
system is telling you fight,
Mm,
even though that's going to lead to violence, division in your family, and no solution. We're saying, it's that's a bill of goods. That's going to make you divided, likely to be more likely to be involved in violence and not solve the problem, and it's going to make you unhealthy too.
mhm.
So listening,
Does that make sense? Does that make
That
sense?
definitely sounds like the one conversation. It sounded so much. You don't have the angst in that conversation within your body because you feel a certain way when you start getting angry when you're being personally attacked or when you're personally
Yeah,
attacked. You have a
yeah,
different feeling in your bones that comes
yeah.
with different energy that comes with that than the other conversation. So it definitely felt just the energy felt different. Yeah.
The social science tells us, Alli, that this is from Dr. Donna Hicks, who's done a lot of work on conflict, that when we experience what she calls a dignity violation, when I say to Shawna, "How dare you, you outrageous fool," he feels that's a dignity violation. The almost immediate neurological and biological reaction is a desire for revenge.
yeah, yeah.
Which also does not feel good energy in your being. It just does not. Yeah.
It's almost, you can't almost can't control it.
Right.
However, it is addictive, and
It's
it's
addictive. That's
helpful.
exactly right. That's why we have an addiction.
Yes, and I love the idea of education of that, hey, there's another way of looking at this
Right.
because creative solutions can come out of the conversations where you feel listened to and
Yeah.
maybe listening without creating your response while you're listening, that's not
Yeah.
listening.
It's not, because you're actually not listening to the other person. You're preparing a counterattack. So while you're preparing your counterattack, you're not paying attention to what the other, especially not at a deeper level. So I'm going to show you. You can't see this very well, maybe, but these cards have the dignity index on them. You can see that your listeners can see this on the web, but on the back, it has skills you can practice when Uncle George triggers you, or when your cousin Susie sends you something on social media that makes you go, I'm going to kill her. So it just says, take a breath.
Hmm.
The most important skill in conflict of all, whether it's statecraft or interpersonal conflict. It says, try to use the words, tell me more.
For further
So you're
understanding.
signaling a desire to understand where the other person's coming from. Answer with dignity. Don't violate the other person's dignity, but give them dignity and shift to facts, policies, and outcomes. Now, you can say, oh, that's easier said than done. It is easier said than done. But here's my premise. Here's our premise. Here's why we met, the three of us, because I think we all believe that our country's in danger. So we got hard work to do, but I'm going to tell you the hard work isn't whether we elect a Democrat or Republican. I mean, I grew up in a political family, so it's hard for me to say that's not the most important. It's very important, don't get me wrong, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing we have to do as a country is break our addiction to hating each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
buck the system that's telling us we should.
And it really
Yeah.
it's one person. And like it starts with me. Not that person has to change. It starts with me.
Exactly right.
And then if we can, come to that conversation differently, then and more of us get involved in coming, being educated with these premises, then we have more hope.
I got to tell you, my little bit of experience on this I was in a very contentious conversation, a political conversation, by the way, about legislation with a very contentious opposing party. And I just stopped. I said, look, one of the skills we teach in social emotional learning is to assume positive intent in the person you disagree with. So I said, I'm going to assume to this person, your intent is the best you believe for the country or for the schools in this situation. And we had another 40 minutes of conversation. It was totally all I did was say that.
Mm.
All I did was stop the escalation
Mhm.
of anger and contempt and attack and just say, look, I'm assuming you have good intentions.
Yeah.
Just giving the other party that breath, like you were saying, Alli, like it just gives you a little bit of pause. It gives you a little bit of comfort. Like, okay, I'm not under attack here. All of a sudden, the conversation turned into a much more productive one. So I don't want to say that's easy, but sometimes little changes, that thing you've been fighting with your child or, your teenage daughter about, or the person at work about, or things that's, hold you up if, maybe sometimes just saying to them, look, I know you're trying your best. Let's
Yeah.
talk about solutions.
And it just takes practice.
Yeah,
It's
it does. It actually does. It's a skill. It's just like being able to, do Pilates or, lift weights or run on the treadmill or whatever it is. You don't go to the gym the first day expecting to lift, all the
always,
weights on the machine. You go to the first day with a lightweight. Otherwise, you get hurt, right? So don't take these skills and walk into the middle of a war zone. Practice. Yeah, we all need a little more practice, but that's what changes cultures when people say, "Hey, I'm not doing that anymore." Like, what would it look like if you said to the person that writes you an email saying, "You should be afraid of the other party. Give me $25," and you wrote them back and said, "I like what you represent, but I'm not going to give to this email because I don't like the way you're using fear and contempt to try to uh, scare me."
mm, yeah, yeah,
All of a sudden, little by little, but that's where we're Americans. We work from the bottom up. We put citizens work together on things, and that's how we hopefully change the future.
yeah, and it starts with the little things. You
And
can't
It
expect.
does.
and
Yeah, and I'm
Kim,
Canadian.
she's
Yeah,
Canadian. And
yeah,
so what's fun about this podcast is we have I'm in the US, Tim's in the US, Shawna's in Canada, and we have listeners in all over. So this is not something that is one country specific, and it can
That's
affect
right.
like your local like at work. This is something you can use to help with conflict in your local community organization, in your church groups, in the
Yeah.
your council. Like, tell me, how are y'all see, or is that something that you're looking at utilizing, and these tools and resources are available that people can use in.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to organize. We're small. We're a very small organization, at Dignity Index, and we're a project of Unite, but we're very small. So we're starting with student groups on college campuses. We've also got an initiative with governors. So we have
Mm,
several governors who are signing up to be governors for dignity and committing to using these skills with the opposite party. We have Republicans and Democrats who are committing, if you're a Republican and you have Democrats in your legislature or wherever it is, and or vice versa, to trying to invite them into using more dignity in disagreement. Student groups on college campuses, which we're organizing, but a lot of businesses are asking us, Alli, to your point, could you train our employees? We've started to do that a little bit, and just show them, because it's when we show people the index, people go, "Oh, wow!" It's not like you don't need to, know calculus or anything like that. Or you don't need to
very
be a
straightforward.
psychologist or a
Yeah,
personal trainer or a nutritionist, or you just need to be human. You just read this and you start to look at it and you go, "Oh, wow, I could say it differently." And all of a
mhm,
sudden you're like, "Oh, I guess the problem was partly me." We call that the mirror effect.
yeah.
mhm.
People, I say, "Hey, let score Ron DeSantis or score Joe Biden," and they're, "Oh, great, I'm going to give it to him." I'm going to show him what a jerk he is, and then they look at the index and they go, "Wait a minute,
Wait.
that's that's what I did. That's what I did this afternoon when I talked to my wife." I
Mhm.
got to, and so it's an invitation. It's a practical invitation to changing yourself, and I think you said that earlier. If we're waiting for the other person to change, that's a recipe for disaster. If we
Mm.
start, each of us changing, um, then we got a shot. And I think, like I do think the data suggests that Americans are sick and tired of the contempt. And they're sick and tired of the polarization and the division and the name calling. And they just don't know where to go to get rid of it.
That
Yeah.
was one of the things that I found interesting from the last webinar, and just that's one of the things that y'all are that the dignity index you're looking at and doing research on is how do Americans feel about this? And can you share a little bit about that and just what y'all have found so
We
far?
found, depending on how you ask the question, somewhere between 60 and almost 90% of Americans want to change. It doesn't get as high as 90, except if it's with certain questions. But it's even if you ask the question in a broad sense, some at least in the low 80s,
Mm.
what I would call the starving majority,
Mhm.
hungry for a change of pace. They don't know where to go. They're not going to get a change from the cable news networks. They're not going to get it from social media because the algorithms and stuff like that. Not going to get it from news because news is almost always bad. So where do they go? They go to you. They go to self-help folks. They go to their spiritual resources. They go online and find music they love, or communities of social service or activity, around an issue. They want to help with homelessness, or they want to help with whatever the issue is. So we're all kind of pulling back from the outrage to find our little space. And what we kind of need is a little bit more of a community that we can all feel a part of. So people are hungry for this. I'll also say that might be interesting to your listeners to think about this. What we have seen is that this is going to be, I might get attacked here a little bit. This is a slight contempt is slightly more of a male problem than it is a female
Hmm.
extreme parties in other countries, in places like Brazil and Poland and Spain, there are disproportionately more men who are
Mhm.
struggling
Mhm.
with real high levels of anger and hostility. I don't see that as an indictment of men. I see that as a cry for help. A
Yeah.
lot of these people who are in these very extreme hatred based cycles are men who are struggling to find a way to express or to feel like they belong. Back to the questions we asked earlier. So, there's some special wrinkles to this, but I think generally speaking, Ali, the answer to your question is by every measure, uh, Americans want to change, but by most measures, they don't know where to get it. We're trying to offer little baby steps to help us get there.
Well, we hope that
Mary?
this gets the message out a little bit with our audience and gives some
Hmm.
options. So they would go to the dignityindex.us.
Right.
And can you tell us a little bit about Unite?
Yeah, Unite is the sort of parent entity that started this. We did a show a couple years ago
Mhm.
called "The Call to Unite." We did a 25-hour live stream with, singers, Common and Amy Grant, with President Bush and President Clinton, with Oprah and T.D. Jakes and Richard Rohr. We're spiritual leaders and um, stars. So Deepak Chopra, the Dalai Lama participated. We had 25 hours. We had kids, we had doctors and nurses and from all over the world during COVID, just saying, look, this is what leads me to believe we can come together. So we launched that, and we've launched several projects with a program we call the Office of American Possibilities that bring people together around democracy, bring people together, Republicans, Democrats, rich, poor, black, white, gay, straight, heartland, coastland, young, old, all those, you know, it turns out we almost all have a lot more we agree on than we realize by watching the news. So, on issues like immigration, on democracy, on COVID itself during the heart of the pandemic, building small teams of people who want to work together on these problems. And Marshall, if you're a person in a faith-based community, if you're a person who's not, maybe you share a certain compassion for people who are sick or struggling or need legal assistance. And so we've created projects, but we're kind of like a loose Unite is like all of us in a way. And so we're trying to do more and more of that work, but the dignity index is our focus right now, because we think that if you will, the thing spreading the virus, if we called this a virus,
Mhm.
there's people trying to heal it and cure it, or vaccinate you, whatever, maybe some people don't like that, but and vaccinate you against, but there's other people trying to give it to you.
Yeah.
And so we've decided to go after where the virus is being spread.
Yeah.
And that's with language and speech in our political and social and cultural institutions that is grounded in hatred and contempt. And so that's why this dignity index is kind of seems like a pretty simple tool, but we hope it can be a pretty powerful catalytic one.
Yeah, and when you were talking about that men, that contempt is a that you see higher levels of that maybe in males. One of the things that I see with dealing with clients is that the spouses of the males, and how that affects them, and if they have a spouse, that male spouse that is very angry about whether it be
Yeah.
politics or whatever, like the health of how that affects their health as
Yeah.
well,
Affects everybody.
children and the children's health. And so,
Yeah.
you growing up, like, if you can kind of like just the effects that what we say has on children, or just can you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, I think parents typically think of themselves as being challenged to create boundaries a lot. If you have a 2-year-old, there's a lot of things the 2-year-old's not allowed to do. 5-year-old, a few more things they can do, but still a lot of boundaries. And you find yourself like a lot of your time is spent reinforcing, hey, no, you can't do that. No, I told you not to do that. And if you do that again, you're gonna no deserve, and threats and cajoling, and a lot of times that leads to anger at your children. And then sometimes if you're angry at work, it leads to even more anger against your children because you can't do anything about it at work. Or if you're angry at your own, let's say parents, then it leads to anger at your spouse. So we have a lot of this buildup of anger coming from the outside into the home.
Hmm.
I'm so angry about Joe Biden, or I'm so angry about the governor or the senator or the congressman or the school board. I'm so angry about that school board. And then the next thing you know, you lash out at your spouse, you lash out at your child. So learning how to manage and channel, and I call it metabolize anger. Anger is not wrong. Anger is just telling you something is wrong.
Yeah.
What you do with it is where you get into the strengths and weaknesses. If I hit you, my spouse, because I'm angry about the world out there, then I've channeled it's not that I was wrong to be angry, it's that I've made it worse by now resorting to violence. I can't manage. I have so much anger. So I do something terrible and violent that hurts children, hurts women and men in these relationships. So it's just another reminder that when we feel when we feel escalation in our lives, feel the temperature start to go up, notice yourself. Don't just pay attention to what's making it go up. That son of a gun, that person doing it again, she's saying it again. Look inward and say, how do I bring my temperature down so that I can decide what to do with anger? One of my teacher colleagues, David Adams, brilliant, he says, anger is like fire. You can use it to cook, or it can burn your house down.
Yeah.
So you can use your anger in a way that leads to something productive, healing, problem solving, but you're going to have to make sure you've controlled its power to derail your thinking or destroy people around you. So that's why I say also that this talk, political hatred, it's not a victimless crime.
Mm. Wow.
When we escalate anger for others, we're increasing the chances that violence will happen, maybe far away from me. If I just spout and spew and hate, people listen to this and they get spouting and spewing and hating, I might never know that fight that ensued 2 hours after someone listened to me was because I so escalated that I derailed that person's capacity to manage and control. And, you know, when you see that kind of, when you see the racism and the anti-Semitism and the hatred of groups, whether it's white or black, doesn't matter, you can trace it back
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
people feeling so much anger from the larger culture that they couldn't control it.
Mm.
And then they do something horrible.
It really is a bit of a message of personal responsibility of
Can be, yeah. I like the way you put it that way. Yeah, yeah.
what can I
We
do?
all have we all have some control over this. That's one of the big lies that we're also told. You're so small, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
No, no, no.
yeah,
You're so big and beautiful and powerful that what you do might very well change the world. That would be the way we put it. So yeah, you're responsible. I love that.
yeah, personal responsibility. So if you had a wish for our audience today, what would you like to share with them, Tim?
Well, I'd like them to know that they have inherent dignity that no one can ever take away from them, that no matter what happens in life, no matter what happens to them, no matter what they do, whether you're listening to this from prison or from poolside shays or from a place of great success in your life or a great place of great sadness in your life, you have inherent dignity. No one can take it away from you. Share it with others. Give to others the same. I think it may sound simple, but I think it's really important. Maybe years ago, people would have learned that in their faith-based communities. Maybe they still do, but sometimes it takes a little bit of that universal message. It's not just us Christians or Jews or Muslims that have dignity. It's everybody. That's what the Special Olympics athletes taught me. Just when you think some people are valuable and some people aren't, forget that.
Yeah,
Think because you can't do this or that your life will be hopeless. Wrong.
yeah,
So you have dignity, everybody. You have it. No one can take it from you. You've had it from the moment you were conceived. You have it till the moment you die, and hopefully, when you travel onward to the next dimension of reality, you'll be able to luxuriate in it a little more. But take time to be in touch with that part of you, and I think that can often help us be in touch with that in others too.
yeah. And I love that. And I mean, my wish would be that, people, just as we spoke at the end, is take some personal responsibility and a deep breath going into those tough conversations. And
Yeah.
that dignity index, I think that is brilliant. And if more people learned about that, I think we would be able to not agree on everything, but just be able to come to some creative solutions.
I hope so.
Around.
I hope so. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all you guys do to help promote a more healthy way of life for all of us. Aging starts at birth, right? So the wisdom we can learn from little babies is big. The wisdom we can learn from people in midlife is big. The wisdom we can learn from people in the last half of life is equally powerful. We do well to listen deeply to each other at every stage of aging, and take some responsibility, to your point, for how much of that dignity we share with them.
Thanks for listening. You'll find me, Alli, on Instagram at Alli Kerr Fitness.
And you'll find me, Shawna, on Instagram at Shawna Kaminski. Feel free to pop us a DM with questions and or feedback.
If you're enjoying the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, please subscribe and share it with other health-minded women. Ratings and reviews are also much appreciated and help us get our message out to a larger audience.
Until next time, be healthy and be happy.